Good day, everyone. This is the last video for the semester. This is about power. So, what we're going to be doing is relate power to work, energy, force, and velocity, and then solve problems involving power. So, before we move on with power, let's first have a brief review of work or the things that we have discussed from the previous video. You know that work is basically transfer of energy, your F dot T. The unit is joules. Your energy is basically the ability to do work. So again, it's still joules. You have your kinetic and then your potential energy. And how are they related with each other? You know that they're related because they have the same unit. Aside from that, of course, um, they're related through your work energy theorem, which were already discussed to you from the previous video. So please just go back to that one kung medyo nahihirapan pa rin kayo. Now, let's talk about power. So, when we talk about power, we usually use the synonyms such as stronger, able to defeat another person. So, we can say that another person is more powerful than you. We can also say it in a sense of authority, or the president has more power compared with other people, something like that. Okay? So, before we begin, let's have the overview or the basic understanding of power. So I'm gonna be showing you pictures and then let's see kung sino yung mas powerful sa kanila. So we have Thor and Victor, right? If I ask you who's more powerful, your answer will depend on who can defeat the other person based on their abilities or how strong they are or based on judging by their looks. So you can say that already. So some of you might say that it's Thor, some of you might say that it's Victor, whatever. So again, we're just talking about the concept of power in layman's term. So um, you know, let's have another picture or a GIF. So you have here, I think this is from One Punch Man. You have Saitama, of course, and Genos. So who's more powerful here? Obviously that the one who's more powerful here is Saitama because he can defeat easily his opponents by one punch. Kaya nga, One Punch Man, diba? So dito alam na alam natin that the person who's more powerful is um, Saitama. Okay? So, yan yung concept natin ng power. So, before we go with the definition of power, tingnan mo, mag-show again ako ng another picture or ng GIF or moving image. So, you have here dogs. Let's just assume that they're both going upward, okay? The other one is slowly hopping from on your left side. The other one is slowly climbing the stairs. And then on the second side, let's just assume that it's going upward as well. Mas mabilis siya, right? If I ask you, which of the situation shows greater work done if the force applied by both dogs is 10 newtons and then they were able to, what do you call this? They were able to approach the distance of 5 meters at that specific. So, parehas sila, right? If I ask you, what is the work done by each of the dogs given that the force applied by both dogs is 10 newtons and then the distance covered is 5 meters, we can say that wala sa kanilang nag-show ng greater work done kasi equal sila, right? Even if the other one is faster and the other one is slower, right? Because we're just talking about the work done and then they have the same force applied. But if I now ask you about which of the situation shows greater power, again, we're assuming that they're both going upward, but the other one is hopping or skipping, while the other one is, much faster or much na faster pa. It's faster approaching the specific place, right? So the force applied by both dogs is still 10 newtons, but the distance is 5 meters. But here, the question now is asking about which of the situation shows greater power. Okay? Now, before we begin, sige, to answer this question, I mean, let's define what power means, okay? Power is basically the time rate at which work is done. So, what quantity are we looking for in terms of power? We're looking at the time, okay? Kung meron ng time involved, dito na papasok yung power, okay? So, it's very, very important to understand the concept of time here because power na yung may concept ng time. Okay, like work and energy, power is a scalar quantity. So if I ask you here, which of the situation shows greater power, titingnan na natin yung time involved. Even if they have the same force, they reach the same place, they reach the same distance, which is 5 meters. However, we're going to look into now kung sino yung mas mabilis kasi ibig sabihin siya yung mas powerful, okay? The shorter the time involved in doing a certain task, the more powerful you are. So that is the concept of power in physics. So if we're going to choose between the two dogs, obviously the second dog is much faster or faster in a sense of reaching the specific distance which is 5 meters compared with the left dog who's just skipping. Okay, but they're both good dogs. So the point is the other one is more powerful or has greater power compared with the left dog. Okay? Sige. So same amount of work is done in both of these situations, but the power is different or the rate at which work is done. So you can see here that obviously the formula for power here, as you can see, is power is work over time. Okay? So, ano din na kasi yung pinaka-basic na understanding of power which is work over time. So, unit, tingnan natin yung unit. The unit is just work is joule per second. Ang joule per second po ay equivalent to 1 watt. Okay, so ito yung gagamitin natin. Now, watts is mostly seen in, power output in your stabak ng mga microwaves, toasters, or appliances. You can see here on the first problem is that the rate or the time involved is 5 seconds and then the other one, the time involved is 1 second. Okay? So you can see here na pag kinumpute natin, 100 divided by 5 is 20 watts while 100 divided by 1 is 100 watts, which shows you greater power, the one with the shorter time. Okay? But the longer time shows you that it has lesser power. So mas maganda pag mas mabilis ka kasi ibig sabihin mas malakas ka or mas powerful ka compared with doing a job which can take you a long time. However, it seems that you're not powerful enough in that given situation. Okay, so hopefully this is clear. Okay, the unit for power is watt, named from the English inventor James Watt. 1 watt is equal to 1 joule per second. Okay, so again, power is equal to work over time. Okay, nakalagay na pala dito. All right. So, what's the relationship between force and velocity? So, we know that power is work over time. Based on the formula for work, work is equal to force times distance. So, if you're going to, again, merge this two formula or set of formulas that we have here, power is equivalent to work over time, while work is equivalent to force times displacement. So, ipapasok natin yung force times displacement sa work over time. So, power becomes force times distance over your time. However, this value right here, which is d over t, is equivalent to your velocity, right? Distance over time is just your velocity. So, power is just force times velocity. So, this is another way of solving for power. So, sometimes you solve problems kung depende rin siya sa given na meron ka. Kung ang given is velocity and then force lang, so this is your formula. So, again, this is one way to solve problems. So, tingnan na natin to. Pag minerge natin yung formula natin, you'll be getting these values, f dot d, and you know that d over t is just velocity. So, pag pinasok natin siya, f dot v. Okay, so please don't forget about that one. So, in terms of conversion of units in power, 1 horsepower is equivalent to 746 watts. Okay, if I'm not mistaken, the term horsepower, again, if I'm not mistaken lang po ha, they used kasi the concept of horses in terms of identifying how powerful. So, ginamit na siya sa tawag mo dito sa cars or other na mga big transportation devices, mga ships, may mga horsepowers yan. Anyways, it's just a tip for you. Here naman po, in terms of conversion of units in power, sometimes the question might ask you na, what is the power in terms of horsepower? So, instead of watts, you have to convert it to horsepower. So, 1 horsepower is just equivalent to 746 watts. And you know how to convert already. So, let's proceed with problem. So in the first problem, a man pushes an object that it has a displacement of 5 meters. The total work done is 200 joules. How much power did he exert to move the object in 5 seconds? So what we're going to do is list down all the given. The distance thou or the displacement is 5 meters. The work is 200 joules. The time is 5 seconds. Solve for the power. You know that power is just equivalent to work over time. Work is just 200 joules, while your time is 5 seconds. 200 divided by 5 will give you 40 joules per second, or basically just 40 watts. Okay? So this is now your power. Sir, yung displacement na 5 meters nasaan na? Wala lang. Pangpagulo lang siya sa formula. Sa problem. Hindi naman kailangan talaga yan. But sometimes there are still problems that might ask you of this one. So, it's very important to list down all the given first before you solve para wala kang problema. So, easy, di ba, yung first problem. Second problem, you're riding a sled down an icy run to a frozen lake and you accelerate the 80-kilogram combination of you and the sled from 1 meter per second to 2 meters per second, in 2 seconds. How much power does that require? Again, you're looking for the power. Before we begin, ayan, let's list down all the given. So, hinahanap natin yung power. Meron kang mass of 80 kilograms. The sled moved from 1 meter per second to 2 meters per second. So, initial velocity is 1 meter per second. Daming S na. The final velocity is 2 meters per second. The time involved is 2 seconds. Okay? So, how much power does that require? Let's go back to our formula. Sabi natin, you have our formula na power, which is equivalent to work over time. So, titingnan natin yung mga different formulas na alam natin for work. Work is equivalent to force times distance. Work is equivalent to the change in kinetic energy. So, obviously, kung gagamitin natin ang force times distance, may force ka ba? Wala. Pwede mo ba siyang masolve? O sige, force is equal to mass times acceleration. Medyo mahihirapan ka kasi technically dito pa lang wala naman displacement na involved. So obviously, this formula cannot be used. So what we're going to be using now is your kinetic conservation of work energy theorem. Which is work is equal to change in kinetic energy. So work is equal to kinetic energy. Let's just solve for the work first. Work is equal to 1/2 mass. So let's just simplify Vf squared. So, final velocity minus initial velocity squared. So, again, pares lang naman siya. Nilabas lang natin yung 1/2 m. Baka magtanong kayo, sir, bakit di ba po dyan ganito dapat siya? 1/2 m Vf squared minus 1/2 m Vi squared. Final minus initial. Again, it's just the same. It's just mathematics. So, let's try it now. 1/2 times the mass is 80 kilograms times your final velocity is 2 meters per second squared minus your initial velocity is 1 meter per second squared. So, input this in your calculator. Evaluating using your calculator, you'll be getting the work which is equal to 120 joules. Tapos ka na ba? Hindi pa, because what you just got is the work done. So, going back to the formula of power, which is equivalent to work over time, you have 120 joules divided by the time, which is just 2 seconds. You'll be getting power which is equivalent to 60 joules per second or 60 watts. Diba? Napakadali lang ng pag-solve nito. Am I still recording? Yes. Okay, so this is your second problem. Next, third problem naman tayo. It's just the same with the second problem. However, it gave you different, different na given. So again, mass of the person is 60 kilograms, running and accelerates from 5 meters per second to 7 meters per second in 2 seconds. How much power does that require? So again, initial velocity is 7 meters per second. Oh, sorry. The initial, sige, final na lang natin to. final velocity is 7 meters per second. The initial velocity is 5 meters per second. The time is 2 seconds. Again, we're going to look for the power. So again, power is equivalent to work over time. You know that from the previous problem, we just used the work energy theorem, which is just change in kinetic energy. So we can solve for the work is equivalent to 1 half m, again, final velocity squared minus initial velocity squared. So 1 half times 60 kilograms times the initial is 5, final pala tayo, 7 meters per second squared. Sige, ganito na lang natin siya. Subtracted by the value of 5 meters per second squared. So again, evaluating using your calculators, you should be getting the value of 720 joules. 720 joules. So this is your work. Again, hindi ka pa tapos kasi power yung yung gagamitin natin. Power is equivalent to 720 joules divided by the time is 2 seconds. So you'll be getting the power which is equivalent to 360 joules per second or 360 watts. Diba? Napakadali lang ng problem solving. Again, joule per second. Alright, next problem. Each of the 4 jet engines of an Airbus A380 airliner develops a thrust or a forward force of the airliner of 322,000 newtons. When the airplane is flying at 250 meters per second, what horsepower does each engine develop? So what we can see here is that the question is not asking for the power in terms of watts, but asking for the power in terms of horsepower. Balikan lang natin that 1 horsepower is equivalent to 746 watts. So babalikan natin to because it's very important. So let's look into the given. You have the work done. The force is 322,000 newton. And then the velocity is 250 meters per second. So you might be asking, sir, paano mo nalaman na yan yung unit? Yan yung given. Forward force, 322,000. Airplane is flying at 250 meters per second. Wala naman ibang unit na ng velocity na iba, meter per second lang naman kasi ang meter per second squared ay acceleration. So you know that this one is velocity. So we're going to look for the power. Balikan lang natin, meron tayong dalawang formula for power which is work over time and then power is equivalent to force times velocity. So alin dito yung gagamitin mo? Obviously the second formula. So power equivalent to 322,000 newton times 250 meters per second. You know that Newton meter, so Newton meter is just joule, so joule per second pa rin siya, so watts pa rin siya. So power is equivalent to 80,500,000 watts. If we're going to use our engineering notation, you'll be getting 80.5 times 10 raised to 6 watts. So, engineering notation lang naman siya. Kung gusto mong scientific notation, 8.05 times 10 raised to 7. Again, this is not yet your final answer because you have to convert this into horsepower. So, just remember that in converting, you know that you just divide this by 746. Palitan lang natin yung ink natin. So, divide this by 746 watts para maging horsepower siya. Ang lalabas pong power natin ay 10790.847,472. Okay? 472. Never mind my handwriting, horsepower. Or, if we're going to simplify this, 1.08 times 10 raised to 5 horsepower or HP. So, this one is your final answer. Not this one, obviously. If you answer this one, mamamalian ka or mababawasan ka ng points because the question specifically asks for horsepower. Okay? Next question, number 5. A 1,000 kilogram car accelerates from 88 meters per second to 100 meters per second in 30 seconds. How much power does that require? Again, ulit-ulit lang po tayo. So, theory of repetition lang yung gagawin natin. Mass is 1,000 kilograms. Final velocity is 88 meters per second. Oh my gosh. Initial velocity is, oh, sorry. Baliktad na pala yung nasulat ko. Okay, never mind. Alisin na lang natin. Ayan. Sine-check ko lang kung nagdadangog pa kamos ako. So, initial velocity is 88 and then final is 100 meters per second. And the time is 30 seconds. So, you're going to look for the power. Power is work over time or force times velocity, but obviously force cannot be solved here. Same with velocity dahil meron kang dalawa. So we're just going to use work as the change in kinetic energy. So 1/2, the mass is 1,000. If you don't want this way of solving, you can expand it para wala kang problema. Pero, I don't want to make things complicated for you. So 1,000 kilograms times, ano na nga to? 100 squared minus 88 squared. Again, let's just simplify. Let's not make things complicated. But that's meter per second. So, ang lalabas pong value natin ay ilagay natin yung lahat. Work is equivalent to 1,128,000 joules or 1.128 times 10 raised to 6 joules. So, that is your work done. So, power is equivalent to 1.128 times 10 raised to 6 joules or 1,128,000 is just the same, divided by 30 seconds, which is your time. So, the power will become 37,600 joules or, going to use scientific notation, 3.76 times 10 raised to 4 watts. Sorry, this is watts. Okay. Ba yan? Ba't kaning joules? Or, if we're going to use engineering notation, 37.6 kilowatts. Because the kilo stands for your times 10 raised to 3. Okay? So, you have this one. So, any of the three naman, para tama, wala namang problema dun because it will still give you the same value. Alright. This is, I think, the second to the last question. Okay. Second to the last question. 10 Newton force is applied to move a car at a distance of 5 meters. How much power does that require if the time it took to move the car at 5 meters distance is 20 seconds? So, nilagay natin force equivalent to 10 newtons. The distance of the car, the movement of the car is 5 meters and then the time is 20 seconds. So, you can see, importante po talaga na sinusulat natin yung given. Power is the question mark. So, again, meron tayong dalawang formula for power. Work over time. Then, power is equivalent to force times velocity. Okay? Do you have your work? Wala. Do you have your time? Meron. But again, this one will be very difficult for you. So, let's just recall that you have distance and time. And remember that d over t for your velocity is just your velocity. I mean, your distance over time is just your velocity. So, ang magagamit natin ay yung second na formula. Power is equivalent to 10 newtons times 5 meters divided by 20 seconds. So, again, that is just your velocity already. Your power is equivalent to 2.5 watts. Diba? Very, very simple lang yung solution natin for power. Next, the last one, how long did it take to move a cart if the output power is 10 watts and the total work done is 5 joules? So, meron ka daw ditong power which is 10 watts. Work done or work is equivalent to 5 joules. You're going to look for your time. So, napakadali lang po. Power is equal to work over time. We're going to use time para ma-solve siya. So, let's just isolate time. T will be equal to work over power. Work is 5 joules. Power is 10 watts. This is just joule per second. Cancel natin yung joule. So, meron kang 1/2 divided 1 divided by 1/2, magiging second na lang yung unit natin. So, time is equal to 0.5 seconds. Diba? So, very easy in terms of solving your problem. So, again, what is important here is that you know how to derive formulas and, of course, to understand the problem. And, of course, use your common sense in identifying what is really asked in the problem. So, that's it for this video. Thank you.